Hello, all. This is Toby Doyle, and today we're going to be talking about editing, the different kinds, and what your expectations are. So, we're going to look at critique, developmental editing, line editing, copy editing, proofreading, professional book coaching, and managing your expectations. So, what is critique? Well, it's an analysis and assessment of your work. When you are critiquing others' work, that makes you a stronger writer because, quite honestly, we are more likely to be able to pick out issues in someone else's work than our own. When submitting work for critique, ask for what you want. So, if you don't want someone to discuss how you've named your characters, for instance, tell them exactly what you're looking for. You may not have questions about world building. Instead, you want your critique partner to really look at your character's motivations to see if they're believable. Don't be afraid to ask for what you want from that critique. When critiquing, be positive and specific. For example, don't just say, your character is too stupid to live. What you want to say is your character's motivations are unbelievable and point out exactly why that is. For example, if the character is willing to open the door knowing that the serial killer is on the other side, you should say, I don't find it believable that they would open the door. Why are they doing this? The motivation here needs work. Now, we know the character's too stupid to live, but as an author, you also understand that when it's your work and you know the character inside and out, what the reader or your job as a critiquer is to say that they haven't translated that onto the page yet. So they need to know what specifically is throwing you out of the story. All right, let's talk about developmental editing. What a developmental editor does is they look at the book as a whole. They identify issues with the story elements, such as mythology, world building, characters, plot, premise, pacing, etc. Again, they're looking at the whole story. You want to have your book developmentally edited after the first draft has been self-edited and revised. If you are, let's say you've got a story that you feel very strongly about, that you've had critique partners read, that you've had beta readers read, and you know you're not quite hitting the mark for your genre, a developmental editor may be the route you want to go. What is line editing? Well, line editing is something that if you are traditionally published, they will pay for. And basically, a line editor is going to focus on the language and the prose of the story. They're going to check your word choices. They're going to identify overused words and repetitious sentences. Um, the structure of the sentence. And they're also going to focus on awkward phrasing and more. So they're really looking at the language of your story. This will occur after developmental edits. So let's say that your editor, you've signed a contract and your work in progress is now in the hands of a traditional publisher. They may have a developmental editor read your story and say, look, this is great, but we need to cut out this entire subplot you have going on. It's just too much for the story. So you'll go ahead and make those changes. After you've made those changes, it gets sent to a line editor who's going to point out that you are using the same sentence structure over and over and over again, and that needs to be fixed. Or things like, you've got 250 that's in there that probably need to be pared down. Other word choices, maybe you've chosen the wrong word and they want you to be more specific. So they're looking at the language. Then you would go ahead and make all of those changes. Sometimes they make suggestions that you can accept. Other times you have to rewrite the section. Then once you're done with line editing with a traditional publisher, it goes to copy editors. For indie publishing, line editing and copy editing are typically done by the same editor. So you would hire someone to do copy editing, and that would include your line editing. At this level, they're looking at the story, the craft, and the grammar usage. And their concern is really about clarity. So if you have an action scene, does it make sense? If you are describing a new room, does it make sense? Consistency. Do your characters have the same name throughout the entire story? How many Thursdays in a row do you have written? And they're also going to look at the correctness of the story. Is it believable? The fact checking, is this possible? Could this have occurred? They're going to look at your timelines. Again, anything from you have two characters who have had 3 Thursdays. They'll look at legal issues, perhaps prompting you to take out specific names of companies and put in a more anonymous name, either make one up or just use something that's more generic. Finally, after copy editing, you're going to have somebody proofread it. Now, sometimes you can find beta readers who are fabulous at this. Honestly, grammar, style, punctuation, and other consistency errors are checked for by your proofreader because they do elude all of the other editors. And because of this, it must be a fresh pair of eyes. So if you've got some great beta readers out there, definitely have one or two beta readers that are really good at proofreading or checking consistency. You want to make sure that your characters have the same eye color throughout the entire book, because it is going to be missed by the other editors. Sometimes you've been reading the words on the page so much that you just can't see the errors anymore. All right, let's talk about professional book coaching. This is different than an editor, and it's different than a developmental editor. A book coach can meet with you once or more to discuss your writing and how to achieve your goals. They can discuss anything from series plotting to your work in progress. So let's say you've got a great idea for a new cozy mystery. Well, you need to have, or you should, because I love to speak in absolutes, but I don't mean them, but you should have an overall arching story that ties your series together. Sometimes working with a book coach can help you figure out how to weave that in throughout the series. They can also give you feedback on your current story. If it's just not hitting your critique partners well, like nobody seems to like your characters and get the point you're trying to make, sometimes talking to a different party can really help you figure out what's going on with your book, things to change, maybe even how to fix the premise or abandon it. Typically, a book coach is a certified developmental editor or someone with years of publishing experience. So we're looking at someone who really understands the industry, and more specifically, you really need to talk to somebody who understands your genre. Often in our critique groups, we have a wild mix of genres. And so someone may not understand the finer points of, let's say, cozy mysteries. If all they write is horror, they might not understand it. Likewise, someone who loves cozy mysteries not only reads, but reads cozy mysteries is not the person to get serious feedback for your high fantasy, trilogy. Professional book coaches, their rates can vary from $50 an hour to $1,000 if you get some of those more pricier ones that actually work with big names in the industry, because even they get book coaching. And you really, again, need to shop around, look for someone in your genre, and reach out to other authors in your genre to see who they are using for help. Because if it's a developmental editor that they're using, I guarantee you that person would be willing to chat with you for an hour about your book. And make sure you have your questions ready. You don't want to waste your time or your money or theirs. And what should you expect from an editor? Well, oftentimes, again, you want to look for an editor that understands your genre, and reach out to them. And oftentimes they'll offer a free page sample. So you just send them the first page and you see how they do. If you're looking at places like Fiverr or Upwork or other places to find an editor, so this is not an editor that you've been referred to by another author, definitely try to get a free page sample, because it'll be really apparent pretty quickly if they're looking for the things or giving you the feedback that you want. Because remember, if you're hiring an editor, you can ask them or work with them to do line edits and copy edits in that same pass. Again, talk about your expectations before agreeing to edit. So don't sign a contract or don't send your work until you've already understood what that editor is going to do for you and if you're willing to pay that price. You usually pay after the edit is complete. Whether or not you like the edit, you should pay for it. Also, come prepared with questions for your editor, especially about what genre they are specialized in. So obviously, I'm a romance writer and a cozy mystery writer. You should hit me up if you're writing romance or cozy mysteries, because the people I work with understand those genres very well. They get the expectations that readers have, and they are willing to point it out to me and really work with me. And also, people who are working in that genre, who like that genre, are very motivated to help you make the best book you possibly can. Okay, expectations of the editors, what they want, an understanding and agreement of what they are responsible for. This is a common complaint I've heard. People will hire an editor for proofreading because that's typically the cheapest, right? So remember, proofreading occurs after the copy editing and line editing. So you can hire someone for proofreading, but when you do that, there should only be a dozen or so mistakes in the novel, and they're only charging you a rate for something that has a few mistakes. And oftentimes the editors I work with don't even offer that. They don't offer proofreading because they've been burned too many times. Another complaint is you're asking for copy editing, but really what you want is a developmental editor's feedback instead. That means that instead of looking for the awkward phrasing and consistency errors that you may have, as well as grammar and all the other fun stuff, somebody might expect that editor who's supposed to just be doing copy editing to give them help on developing their characters' goals, motivations, and conflicts. And that's just not their job. Also, pay them promptly. Once you receive that work back with the editing marks, go ahead and pay them. You need to understand their expertise in your genre. Again, don't hire somebody, I'm going to say Fiverr, don't hire somebody on Fiverr and expect them to be able to understand your genre readers' expectations. You really need to understand their expertise before you hire them. And keep to the timeline agreed upon. Many of the editors I work with, they have a very strict schedule to keep because they're trying to put food on the table too. So if you promise them, and a lot of times you have to schedule ahead of time. So if you promise them the completed manuscript, which should have been self-edited, you need to turn it in at that time. And there's stories of people who get things late to their editor and they're like, oh, it's so sad. But think about it this way. If you were trying to get paid for your work, you're counting on that money coming in. It's not like they can turn around and tell the mortgage company that they just can't make their mortgage this week. So really keep to the timeline agreed upon. And if you're working in traditional publishing, if you mess up their timeline, you are changing everything because they are expecting to have your book up and published at a specific date. And they are working with all of the other editors in their publishing company, because what you don't want is to have 3 books with a similar premise, similar storyline being published in the same month. They are very careful about when they publish. They have a calendar, they work it all out. And if you mess that up, you are messing up a lot of people's work. So try to be extremely responsible, give yourself plenty of time to make sure that you can make any deadlines that you agree upon. And that's all I've got. Stay tuned for more.